What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. This is the Texans Better Talk Show. I have a question for you guys. How much blame do you pin on Bobby Slowik for CJ Stroud's protection issues? If you're DJ Bieniemy, it's a lot. DJ Bieniemy is a Texans ESPN reporter who just wrote an article this past Saturday about Bobby Slowik's firing, the Nick Caley hiring, and scheme and protection issues, and take a listen to what he had to say. The article is titled, "Predictability, Lack of Adjustments Doomed Bobby Slowik." I completely agree with this. The article starts by looking at some of the Texans' most brutal losses, and unfortunately there's a lot of them. Week 1 obviously was a win, but Stroud was sacked 4 times. And what's funny is D'Amico actually said, "We've got to put on film that we can handle pressure. There's too many times where someone touched the quarterback. It just can't happen." This is actually insane because this is after week 1, D'Amico Ryans recognizing what would become a real issue with this Houston Texans pressure. Obviously, the article also starts with the divisional round, which we remember CJ Stroud was pressured on 56% of his dropbacks, which is the second highest pressure rate in the playoffs since ESPN started recording pressure rate in 2009. So ever since 2009 to now, that is the second most pressure rate a quarterback has faced in the playoffs. If you're curious about number one, it was Tim Tebow when he was on the Broncos. But anyway, moving on. Week 9 against the Jets, Stroud was sacked a career high 8 times, which unfortunately would happen again in the divisional round. And this was considered the boiling point, according to Bieniemy. He said that players were frustrated, thinking that a contending team should not have lost to the 2-6 Jets at the time. And they should have been mad. I mean, after this, they held a players-only meeting. Yeah, we had a good record. Our record was 6-3, but they felt like they needed to bridge that gap. Obviously, after losing to a 2-6 team with Aaron Rodgers, and yeah, Will Anderson, after the season ended, said, "We can't lose to teams like the Titans and Jets." I believe he got fined for that as well. And then after that game, Stroud said it wasn't easy to operate under constant pressure and added that their problems are bigger than the absence of Collins and Diggs. He directly said, this is a quote, "There's things that even if they were out there, it wouldn't help." So yeah, I mean, like I said, this is the boiling point. This is when we started to realize this offense has extreme limitations offensively with protection issues and scheme issues. And obviously, as Stroud's admitting, even if Diggs and Nico Collins are there, it doesn't get much better. That's when we really started to see how bad the offense was, I'd say, after that Jets game. Obviously, the Lions game in week 10, when Stroud throws 2 second half interceptions, the offense has 97 total yards, 0 points, and a total of 5 first downs, 23-7 at half, and ended up losing 26-23, even after intercepting Goff 5 times. What's funny, I say funny, what's funny but not funny about this loss was in the presser, D'Amico Ryans basically said the defense had to be better, which is insane to think about when you intercept Goff 5 times. But I feel like he's just always, I feel like at that point, any blame towards the offense, it would have just looked like a scapegoat because of how bad they were. But anyway, we can also talk about the Ravens game on Christmas Day. The Texans losing 31-2. Stroud was sacked 5 times in that game. Here's a fun statistic. From weeks 9 to 18, Stroud was contacted 58 times on passing plays and sacked 30 times. He was contacted 58 times on passing plays. That's absolutely insane. And then again, their season came to an end in a very fitting end as Spags, the Chiefs' defensive coordinator, sent a bunch of pressure at Stroud, blitzing him on 10 of his 18 fourth quarter dropbacks. He was 3 for 8 for 41 yards with 2 sacks and 6 unblocked pressures when blitzed. The Texans scored 0 points. Stroud faced 6 unblocked pressures on 10 blitzing attempts in the fourth quarter against the Chiefs in the divisional when you have to have that game. Absolutely absurd. It's also worth noting that Bieniemy goes on to say that Spags was basically able to manipulate Bobby Slowik's protection issues. They were able to match up Dalton Schultz on George Karlaftis 3 times, all 3 of which times Karlaftis sacked Stroud. So that contributed to the 8 sack count total. I mean, Bobby Slowik just completely out of his league when it came to trying to scheme up protection against Spags. So That's kind of a game rundown. Now let's go into what some of the team sources said about this season. I just feel like the offensive coaches were putting a lot of pressure on Stroud, a team source told ESPN. When teams would take away what we wanted to do, we didn't have answers for it, an anonymous player told ESPN. Anonymous player. We simply weren't good enough offensively. We had all season to make adjustments and improvements, and it never happened. That's a team source. As the struggles mounted, some players lost faith in Slowik. That's fair. A team source said that as well. And then before Ryans fired Slowik, Ryans asked players for their opinions and didn't get many ringing endorsements. So obviously the players themselves not happy with Bobby Slowik. Someone said, a player, so not a team source, but a player said, I don't think we had a true identity of what the F we wanted to do. That sounds like Joe Mixon. That is not 100% Joe Mixon. That's just my opinion. But again, let's go back to what Bieneme said. He says there were differing opinions on why Stroud's play tailed off, but none of the sources ESPN spoke to believe it's a talent issue. Multiple team sources believe Slowik was trying to make Stroud a system quarterback versus getting him to play more naturally, which is being a playmaker and pushing the ball down the field. So he goes on to say that making the scheme less predictable and giving the line the tools to protect the quarterback will go a long way in helping the Texans take the next step. Let me just say that again. Making the scheme less predictable and giving the line the tools to protect the quarterback will go a long way in helping the Texans make the next step. Finally, some last team sources. Slowik overcomplicated reads, didn't allow Stroud to play fast. Stroud himself said, there's one time when I sit back there and I'm thinking too much. He said that after the Jets loss. So DJ kind of ends this article on a positive note, talking about the Nick Caley hiring. Couple quotes from Nick Caley. He's not going to try to fit a square peg into a round hole. He's going to be a very player-friendly scheme that's going to put the attributes of the players first. And so, yeah, the problem's solved, right? I mean, new offensive coordinator, fired your offensive line. Surely the protection will be better this year, right? Here's my problem with everything I just listed out. And it all goes back to that quote saying, making the scheme less predictable and giving the line the tools to protect the quarterback will go a long way. Look, I think there's some truth to that. I think if Stroud, and this seems to be the general consensus, the reads were too complicated for Stroud. He didn't have enough time to be a playmaker, and that might be why we saw him take some deep sacks. A lot of the sacks Stroud took weren't the O-line's fault necessarily. It was just him holding onto the ball too long. You also start to wonder how much of that is on Stroud. And so while I wish I could just blame all of the protection issues on Bobby Slowik in his scheme, I don't know if that's the reality. And I don't know if switching Bobby Slowik with Nick Caley is going to instantly fix the protection issues that this offense had. Obviously, we were hoping it's going to fix some. It's hard to do much worse, I'll tell you that much. But I don't know if it's going to be a clean fix, as Bieneme is saying. Here's another thing we have to think about. This isn't the first year we've had Bobby as a head coach. This isn't the first year we've had Chris Strausser as an O-line coach. They were both in their respective positions last year. Last year, the offensive line was a lot better than it is this year. It was serviceable. It wasn't amazing, but it was serviceable. It was average. So what changed from last year to this year? I would say the players. I mean, obviously, Fant was a free agent right tackle signing. He left. Michael Dieter played a lot at center, if you remember that name. It was kind of a revolving door at the line. And I remember coming into this season, all the hype was supposed to be that this line's going to be great. Stroud's finally going to have some continuity at the line. Well, if you're just looking at the stats, this line is worse than they were last year. The revolving door was better last year. And if you want to tell me that teams did their research, they figured out Bobby's protection schemes, and that's why the first year's better, that's fine. We can say that too. That can be part of it. I do think it has more to do with some of the players revolving and switching out. But if you want to argue that it's because they had a year of film on Bobby, that's okay too. Here's the thing though. Giving the line the tools to protect the quarterback kind of contradicts some of the things that we've been seeing with our own eyes watching these Texan games. And that is not bad scheme necessarily. It's not super complicated blocking. It's just free rushers down the middle, down the A-gap. I've said this multiple times. Shaq Mason needs to be cut or traded from this team. He is not serviceable as a right guard, and you need to go draft a right guard or try to sign one in free agency. I don't think Nick Caley has the ability to significantly prove this offensive line. I think he can make it better, but I don't think he's going to significantly prove it because of the players on the team. And that's where I want to kind of really focus this video on is we should be placing a lot of blame on this offensive line, on the bodies in the offensive line. And some of us are, and I think some of us have kind of fallen into this. It was Bobby Slowik and Chris Strausser. Now they're out. Nick Caley's here. Back to good vibes. Like, guys, the 5 guys on the offensive line have not changed. They were all not amazing. Laramie Tunsil was fine. Blake Fisher's a rookie who's supposed to grow into the role. That's fine with me. He's going into his 2nd year now. Drew Scruggs hasn't been healthy. Shaq Mason's been god-awful. Titus Howard was bad at right tackle. He's been okay to whatever at left guard. Like, Jarrett Patterson's your starting center, the 6th-round pick from the same draft class as Drew Scruggs, who's beating out Drew Scruggs. Like, the players on this line are not very good. So my expectations are still in the toilet for this offensive line. The protection issues were not simply simple scheme and Bobby Slowik being bad. Like, yes, that can be true, but I think it runs a lot deeper than that. And I think we can't fall into the trap of just thinking that everything's going to be fine now that we have Nick Caley and a new offensive line coach who's actually in the building. He just got promoted. So you've got a promoted offensive line coach. Why am I saying all this? I'm saying all this to say, don't be fooled by the articles that come out. Don't be fooled by people who say that got a new offensive line coach, it's going to be fine. Go draft an offensive lineman. Yes, I understand that every offensive lineman you have that's relevant is under contract, including Kenyon Green. Kendrick Green's the only one who's set to be a free agent. I understand that. You need to draft a guard. You need to draft a tackle and move him to guard. You need to draft a center. You need to draft somebody at this offensive line spot. Just the way these guys performed last year, the stuff I saw with my own eyes, the miscommunication. And look, I think the best example of it is watching Shaq Mason pull and try to pick up an edge rusher on a run play. Like, okay, fine. That's bad scheme. I'm not going to place that on Shaq Mason. Would a better guard have had a better chance of doing that? Yeah. Could a better guard have done that? Yes. Are guards asked to do that at times? Yes. But sure, fine. You want to blame Bobby Slowik for that, for pulling a guard on an edge rusher, that's fine. But I can't blame Bobby Slowik if the nose tackle is splitting the gap between Jarrett Patterson and Shaq Mason or Drew Scruggs and Shaq Mason. Like, that's not scheme. That's not Bobby Slowik's doing. That is bad play at the offensive line. And I don't know how much coaching can fix that. I don't know if they need to go back to fundamentals like Nick Caley says and they'll fix that. I am still for drafting a lineman. And so, to answer the beginning question, how much blame do you place, what makes up the blame when talking about this Houston Texans offensive line protecting Stroud? I think a majority of it is the players. If you want to say it's like 50% of the players, I think that's the minimum I would go. I would go probably more 60% of the players, like 30% Slowik, or maybe 50% and 30% Slowik, and the rest on Stroud. My point being, you've only altered a little piece of the protection, right? Of the input that goes into the protection. You need to keep changing and you need to keep fixing, because you cannot start the next season with Shaq Mason as your right guard and see no improvement at that offensive line spot. And the only way it's feasible is if you go draft someone. So that's kind of all I got for this video, guys. I'm making sure to link the article down in the description since I pulled a lot of stuff from it. It was a great article. Enjoyed reading it. So shout out to DJ. And yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions or any thoughts about this topic. And I will see you on the next one, man. Peace out.